I spend a lot of time in prison. I've worked part-time in the medical clinic in a women's prison in BC since '94. And over those years, I've developed my own sense of continuity of care. It's a provincial prison. The women, many of them come in and out. And so they see me as their family physician in prison. I feel deeply privileged to be part of their lives and to witness their journey. And the story I'm going to tell you dates back several years ago. And I'm going to tell the story and how I came to write it, but then also tell you about what happened to the story after I wrote it and the life that it took on. So I'm sure many of you experienced this as you're driving home from your day at work. Things that the patients have said to you will go over and over in your head. It does with me anyway. And then when things are quiet at home and everybody's in bed, those things keep going over. And this particular encounter stayed with me, and I could recall everything that the woman had said to me, everything, as if she was still with me in the room. And I knew that I had to write it out. It was the way that I could cope with it. So I wrote it out, and this is what I wrote. She says, "The pissing smell keeps coming over me. I can't get rid of it. It comes into my nose and fills my mouth, and I'm suffocating. Maybe 4 times a day it happens. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I feel like I'll suffocate with the pissing smell. I need air." Then I remember coming down on him over and over, and the awful pissing smell. I can't stand remembering this. I feel shamed and dirty, and the smell. Why can't I get rid of it, doctor? I tried to protect my young stepbrother. I tried to hide him all the time from Mr. C, always hiding him so it wouldn't happen to him too. There were many others later who abused me, but I don't remember them as much. It's always Mr. C and the pissing smell that I remember. Then I feel angry with Mr. C, angry that I was forced to live with the family, and then I become angry at all white people for what happened to me. Drugs for 25 years, always drugs, always thinking I was dirty and shameful. Now that I'm not on drugs in here, I don't want to live. I want to die, to kill myself, rather than to remember this over and over again. That's why I want to go on the methadone, doctor. I've been talking with the alcohol and drug counselor here. Maybe methadone will help me to stay away from the drugs. I went to see a methadone doctor when I got out of here last time. He gave me a script for the juice with a paper written on it about where to get the methadone. I didn't like to tell the doctor that I can't read. I thought I'd ask people in the street how to get there. I'd show them the paper and they'd help me. But nobody would stop to help me. They all looked at me and saw a native person, brown and ugly and poor, and nobody would read my paper and show me the way. I got very angry and frustrated. Then I saw a bus and saw Hastings, and I knew that the bus would be easier than finding the methadone. The bus took me back to the life I've lived for 25 years, back to what I know, and now I'm in here again. I'd like to start on methadone now, then maybe when I get out of here, I won't go back to the dope. I want to learn to read. I'm working at my school work in here, but I can't concentrate because that pissing smell keeps coming over me. Then I think I'm losing my mind and I can't figure out the words that I'm learning. The teacher says I should sort out my life first, then it will be easier to learn how to read. I pray a lot and I go to the smudges and the sweats. I listen to native music in my room in the evenings. It helps drown out the memories and the pissing smell. I ache for this woman, her brokenness, her attempts to survive, to turn her life around. I clutch at a fleeting idea, a small tangible way of maybe helping, like a drop in the ocean in which she's flailing. What about story tapes, I say, books on tape? They really helped my children learn to read. You listen to the story and it's fun, and then you follow the words in the book. Does the school in the prison here, do they have books on tape? Her eyes light up, a smile transforming her face into pathos of beauty. "I love stories," she said. "When I was a child, our teacher read us every day from a big fat book called The Peach, about animals and insects that lived in the peach. I love that story. I couldn't wait for the next day to hear her read more about the peach. I loved going to school then. That was the only time I loved going to school. I think I could learn to read if I listened to stories like that again." So I quietly resolved to check out our local children's bookstore for storybook kits to donate some to the prison school. And meanwhile, I had already decided to break the then prison policy, and I decided that I would start this woman on methadone. So having written that out as a story, what does one do with a story like this? Whose story is it? It's partly my story, but it's mostly her story. Does it sit in my drawer and do nothing? Or does it have value? Is it something that other people can learn from, other doctors, other medical students? Would it help people understand about women who live in prison? So I mulled it over. And then editor of a medical journal expressed some interest in publishing some prison medicine. So I shared with him this story, and I said, "Is this something that you would be interested in publishing?" And he said, "Well, there's no way we could publish this without the patient's consent. It's the patient's story as well as yours." And I completely agreed. By that time, of course, the woman was no longer in prison, so I just put it in my bottom drawer and forgot about it. About a year later, she came back into prison. And I thought, I wonder if I should ask her about this story. But how do I ask her? I'm a prison doctor. She's a prisoner. How can I tell her? So I saw her in the medical clinic several times on several occasions, and then I realized she was actually going to be released shortly. And so again, she was in the clinic, and we dealt with the medical problem. And I didn't know how to do this, and I didn't feel very right about it. I wasn't sure if this was right or not. But I said, "Sherry, last time you were in, you told me some things, and they stayed with me. And I just was very deeply touched and moved by your story. And I wrote it out. And I'm wondering if you would consider this story being published so that other doctors and other people can learn from your story." And she looked at me. "You mean people would want to read my story?" She was just amazed that this would be possible. So I said, "Yes, because actually your life can teach people to understand more." So I said, "Would you like me to read the story, how I wrote it out?" And she said, "Yes, I'd love to." So I read this to her. And as I read, I watched her, and she was smiling and nodding and crying, just weeping as I read it. And she kept saying, "Yes, that's my story. Yes, that's my story." And at the end of it, she said, "That's my story." And so together we wrote out a consent form, and she signed it. And I said, "Well, if it does get published, I'm not sure if it will, but if it does, I'll be sure, of course you can have it." And then I said, "Would you like your name on the story as well? I mean, it's your story. It's not my story." And she said, "No, I don't want my name on it. No, you can have your name on it." So, and again, she was released. And then again, obviously, it takes a long time to get it published, a year later or whenever it was. It was published. Oh, I think, though, then she came back, and I did tell her, "It is actually going to be published." And I said, "Could you give me your address so that when it is published, I can get you a copy?" And so she gave me her address, and sure enough, when it was published, I did find her. She had a room in a rooming house in downtown Vancouver, and I took it to her. So that's my story, and that's the story of the story. What happens to it after it's told. And I need to also say that now women in prison are writing their stories and sharing their stories, and we'll have a book of them one day, I think. Thank you.